Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome everyone. Welcome to Whining On. My name is Matthew Bone, the Incredible Rogue, and today I am very blessed and glad to have Frodo Santini here with me. Just a couple of quick things to say before we begin the podcast. If everyone would like to check, we are now on YouTube. If you're not there already, please check out, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, please join and follow the Whining On with Public Performer site or the Incredible Rogue site. And before we begin, Frodo, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Very, very good, buddy. Very good. So we're going to begin your story. I did a bit of research before we began the show, and I was told that you're a third-generation performer.
That's correct, yes. My dad learned from his uncle, so it's not sort of a strict generational connection, but I think of myself as that. So they were magicians, both of them. My dad still is. He doesn't perform so much anymore. He now mainly does building. He builds magical apparatuses, magical tricks. I don't know if you know about it, but magicians buy and sell tricks to each other. Yeah. So he makes stuff based on electronics. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler. Or if it is, we can just edit that out later. He makes use electronics to build products that's sold through a Danish store called Pagani, which is a magic store in Denmark. It's biggest in Scandinavia.
And so what was your household like growing up then?
Oh, I don't know. It's his dad always had a place. First it was in the basement, and then he rebuilt the garage as a magic studio, where he has like a desk where he has all of his electronics and everything, and magic equipment. So from quite young, I was drawn towards being in the show, but I wasn't allowed to be in the show until I could do an act myself. That was kind of the...
And so were you brought to the shows as a baby? Was shows part of the family life?
No, he did actually take a break. So he did shows from when he was a teenager and then up for, I don't know how long exactly, but for decades. And then when he met my mom and they started working and doing all this serious and had a family and whatever, then he took a break and he didn't really start again until I don't know how old I was. But anyway, maybe I was about 8 or 9 or something. He was doing shows, and then I started doing shows properly with him when I was about 10.
Okay, what did you do?
My first act was a torn and restored paper act. That was the first thing that I did. I don't know if I was like totally awesome at the magic, but I think that caused some of the situations that I've later kind of become my sort of hallmark or trademark thing of things not going quite right.
Yeah. So, and what was the initial drive as a young person? What was, if you can recall, what was going through your head as a young person, the wish to be an entertainer?
Yeah, I think it was just a sort of odd. I got it the wrong way around, I think, a little bit, because I got the desire to be in the show before I properly had the desire to do any skills. So I just wanted to kind of be on the stage, kind of like I had this feeling like I'm already out there, and then going like, man, I wish I could do something now, because now I got the attention. And that's, I think, how I got into actually practicing a little bit and doing magic, and then got into circus from there.
What was the thing that was wanting you to be on the stage? Was it that you wanted to be with dad, like dad, or was there a thing a lot of people talk about seeing a show or seeing a comedian or seeing a certain act, and that inspired them?
I think it was just that I saw it with my dad. That was the first thing. I went to a Steiner school, so we did a lot of it's part of the curriculum there. You're doing plays and you sing in a choir and you do music and all this sort of stuff. So also, I guess I felt kind of comfortable with that as well, and was doing well with that. Yeah. I was going to audition for some. I got a Christie play one time, but I didn't get that, so maybe I wasn't so good.
Got for an Agatha Christie play now. Mr. Prowell, right?
Yeah. Yeah, now I could do it for sure.
So when you learned the Torn and Restored, did your dad sit down with you and show you some stuff? Was your dad teaching you magic when you were young?
When I was very young, he did, but he also quite quickly used it as a trick to make me read a bit more. He would because you'd buy tricks and then you'd get the instructions with it, with some hilarious patter suggestions of what you could say whilst doing the trick. Didn't use so much of that, but it was certainly one of the reasons for why I got a strong desire to learn how to read and to understand English, because it's being a kid in Norway and then English was not a thing. But I all of a sudden had all these texts, some of it instructions for how to operate a finger guillotine or like a rope trick or something, whether it's from lecture notes that other magicians had made or from books. It gave me a strong desire to want to learn so that I could get this information out of it.
Yeah, it sounds like you were quite driven then. You were driven by discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I think I'm a bit of a nerd, so when I get excited about something, I can't let it go. So I went through phases as a kid also with reading Sherlock Holmes and getting deeply into whatever subject it was that I was passionate about at the time, Star Wars. Then I would just be all consumed.
Yeah, fair enough. And so as you progressed, you did your first show when you were about 10, did you say?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
How quickly were the shows gathered after that? Was it you did one when you were 10 and one the next year, or?
No, we did a lot of shows. I said, Dad, I just got back here now, and he's well, it started out when I was first little, and then he had sort of been out of the market, so it grew, of course. But he just said he threw out some paperwork of where he'd written down how many shows, and we'd done about 130 shows in a year.
Wow.
So it's like a show every third day. But it was, of course, it was very bunched up against holidays and up towards Christmas and stuff, and on the kind of the 17th of May, which is the Norwegian National Day, we might do 3 or 4 shows in a day. We just go from party to party and do these different things. So,
and are you working with your dad? Is it your dad, and so it's Santini and Son?
Yeah, well, it was Santini's magic show.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the name. Yeah, that was actually one. I was living in Vegas up until the plague hit us. And one of the ideas of what I wanted to do when I got back here is to put Santini's magic show, like the Santini's family circus, back on, and have me and my dad back on stage again for the first time since the late 90s or mid 90s, maybe even, and have my daughter in it. She's got the same kind of flexible shoulders that I have, and she's very excited to be in the show. She also has more desire to be in the show than do any practice. So I have a couple of strategies for how to just use her, and I basically take her as a volunteer, but present it as her act. And my wife will be playing some music, so it'd be like a full family show. But there are so many restrictions at the moment still connected to some of the places. I thought I'd rent a school hall or whatever, and where rent would be very cheap because you could still have very few people. There's all sorts of restrictions, but now there's some restrictions in regards to schools too, that the school has to stand empty if you've had a crowd in it that is not from the school. So now it's just we can only do one show on a Friday after school before it's nighttime or whatever. So anyway,
taking it as a street show?
Hey, yeah, that's probably a possibility. Yeah, it's so rainy and cold here now. It's that's hard, but that's a good possibility.
Yeah. So just drawing back to the chronology and getting back to young Frodo in the Santini Magic Show. Yeah. What was the experience like for you then? So you've done your show at 10 and you did about 100, 130 shows until you were 11, right?
130 shows a year.
So that's every year. So what's the experience like doing these 130 shows, going around with Dad and kind of being a working performer at that age?
Yeah, well, we really loved it. It was it gave me a very close relationship to my dad as well. Like the fact that we shared this interest. And I mean, when I started, it was very clear that I was the assistant and he was the magician. I did a couple of things, but then as I got a little older, I got some juggling chops and opened the show with a juggling act where I did devil stick and juggled balls and eventually did clubs as well. And then we finished the show with a straitjacket escape. So Dad would put a chain and a straitjacket on me. And So by that point, I don't know how old I was, but as I became more of a teenager, then we would sort of there would be more arguments as to who was taking what, and was I still the assistant, or am I now kind of wanting to take the show in a new direction and whatever? So
The son replacing the father.
yeah, to some extent, I guess that was like certainly became part of the discussion.
And did that become part of the stage narrative as well? Because I can see a clear father and son stage narrative and how that would play. But as you got older, did the relationship change on stage?
Yeah, I think it changed a little bit. Yeah, I think I felt like I needed to get some more room and some more say in everything, like what costumes to wear and what music to play or or whatever. But that was sort of like that also, though, in a very strong way, gave me the impetus to push me to do my own things. And I got more started sort of, that was a little bit later, but I started getting more into freak show things. And for the market that we were playing, there was no room for any of that. No human pincushion or any blockhead or anything. But the fact that I was interested in it and had those skills, so it wasn't done. So when was that? In 93 or 94, I think. Then I went.
Just before we move on to that, and
Yeah,
let's put a pin in that, so to speak.
yeah.
Just for people who are watching, who are thinking about doing, young people who are thinking about starting, working in family, stuff like that, just on this period from 10 to 13, 14, was there any of the problems you found? Was there anything you struggled with? Anything that you had to work through as you were doing that? Things you were learning, skills, stagecraft?
I mean, there was always learning, but my dad has a very pragmatic attitude towards everything. So we would rehearse, so we knew the acts and everything, but a lot of the stuff was just uh, was about just going out there and then making it work. So I know from when I then started going onto the street and from talking to a lot of other street performers is that that's also often how that is solved. And I think maybe because we were doing low key kind of shows and we're in a small town on the west coast of Norway in Haugesund, there was also no real competition. In fact, the circus community here was my dad and myself. So there was one other magician that we sometimes hooked up with, but he was not working as much as we were. So, and he was also an adult or like an old man as far as I was concerned. So I didn't know anyone else that was my age. So that but I always kind of felt like I was a little bit on the outside, but still it became my identity. So when I was hanging out with other people, they would call me Trylle Frodo, the magic Frodo, or whatever. Like, so people were aware that I did these things, but there wasn't until I started really getting into doing more of the circus stuff that I managed to get some other people that lived around to come and
So
hang out and
there was a bigger juggling community there than there was a magic community?
no, there wasn't, but I made one. I borrowed my school hall, and it started with just people from the school that wanted to come and juggle, and then eventually I got some of my friends who were doing skateboarding and stuff to come and do juggling and circus and stuff, and we traveled to some juggling festivals, and that kind of got a little bit of a culture. And then I organized the first Norwegian juggling festival in 1996. So I guess I was, well, how old was I then? 20. Yeah, I was born in 76. So that's a little jump ahead.
Where's the skills coming from?
Well, the magic skills came from dad and from books and eventually also from some VHS tapes. And the performance skills just came from doing a lot of shows. And also, every year we would make a new program. So I would have to come up with a new act. I mean, I could do different, sort of slightly different juggling things or whatever. And the straitjacket stayed in for a long time because that was a bit of a hit. Once we cranked up the theme tune from Indiana Jones and I got the straitjacket on, then the show was a good closer. The juggling.
Yeah,
The juggling skills. Yeah, that came from when we went for there was every year there was a big magic gathering at the convention center in Sweden that we used to go to, and I bought The Complete Juggler by Dave Finnegan, which is like this fat book that most jugglers have been into. And I learned my my devil stick from that, and my juggling from that. Learned to juggle scarves, and then juggled balls.
I mean, I'm a slightly different, not necessarily so much a different generation. I was born in '84, so I am a little bit younger than you are. But when I started learning juggling, there was DVDs for everything, and so I could watch it and repeat it.
Yeah,
I can't imagine learning juggling from a book.
Yeah, it was hard. I remember it took me a long time to learn how to juggle a cascade from a book. Also because I didn't know any other people that knew how to juggle. So I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Or sometimes it just is like that 100th monkey principle where you feel like if there's a lot of people around you who know how to juggle, it's almost by osmosis. It's easier. Yeah.
I have a theory that the human brain is constantly looking at other human beings and using their motion to calculate your own motion. And so when you're around jugglers and you can see them doing things, the brain's calculating what they're doing, understanding the physics of it, so it can reproduce it. So looking at a book and seeing a picture of someone doing this or a drawing of someone going like this, you're not getting that input.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That is a very good idea. I think it's totally true as well, and that might be part of that osmosis that I'm calling it osmosis. It's like you see it and you automatically see what it is that you're doing wrong.
And so what was it like teaching other people when you're kind of just about learning the skills from a book yourself? Was that a helpful thing?
To be able to do it for people, to perform it.
Bringing your friends in when you started doing the juggling workshops.
Yeah, by that stage I could juggle 3 and 4 balls and could juggle clubs and do some tricks and stuff. So I needed to be able to know how to do it well enough so that it looked like it was something that was worthwhile other people picking up, I guess. Because and I did, but I mean it's also, and then there was someone who I knew who already were doing unicycling. Someone who were doing trail bike riding, and they knew how to ride a unicycle, and then I bought a unicycle, and then we had that too in our juggling group. So there was 2 unicycles, and then they learned how to juggle, or she learned how to juggle, and that became part of the team. So very community.
Was there a drive to passing? Did you guys get to passing? That's one of my favorite joys with juggling.
So in 1993, I I subscribed to Cascade magazines, a juggling magazine that was big in the 90s, I guess. And it had a list of all the workshops around. So I went on an interrail and was going to travel around Europe and just go to juggling workshops. And then went to England almost as soon as it started, and then spent that whole time just going around England. Spent a long time in Bristol and stayed with the guy there, Tarim, who is a passer, and he does all this right and left-handed passing. So that was for a long time all I did, 3 counts.
I'm intrigued to hear, as someone coming from a different country, traveling around the UK to see the juggling scene at 1993. You're doing this,
I think, yeah.
So what was the scene like there from an outsider's perspective?
From coming from Norway, where there was I didn't know any other. It was amazing, but it was literally, it's like it'd be school halls and church halls and stuff. But I basically it was me and my partner at the time, and we'd just rock up to those places, and you strike up a conversation, and afterwards everyone would be juggling and passing, doing a lot of passing, because it was kind of, most of those workshops were kind of like people who are doing social juggling, and that too was kind of new for me, because I always thought of it as like a performance thing, but just getting to hang out.
Social juggling.
People who juggle not to perform, juggle because they think it's fun, and they're not doing it because they want to do a show, or they want to show somebody that they can juggle 2 balls and eat the apple at the same time.
It's a hobby.
People who just hobby, yeah. Well, like just for the lifestyle of it, and it's like sometimes maybe it still is odd, but that there are people who just really love juggling, and that was that feeling there. You just met all these people who are like, going to uni or studying or doing, and they're just juggling at the university. Like some of these workshops were at universities, but they were open, so you pay whatever, £2 or something, and then you juggle for some hours and try to hook somebody up for getting to stay on their couch or something.
Yeah, so
And
it's
that
kind
was,
of like a party. You're thinking,
yeah,
right, where can I stay? Who's going to go to a party after this?
yeah, exactly, yeah,
And I
yeah.
suppose passing goes into that a lot then, because passing is that kind of, it's a sociable juggling activity. You can get 3 or 4 people and interact together. You're not just tossing on your Todd, so to speak.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, no, it was good. That was great. We
And were you aware of street shows at this time? You're 17 now when you're traveling around the UK. Are you aware of street shows? Are they somewhat present in your
yeah,
mind?
well, but I wouldn't, not fully, because when 1994 then was that was the year when the Olympics came to Norway. And that was because I had done a little bit of street shows before with my dad, but because he was selling the show, we had performed on the street, but not done a proper hatting show. We'd like do a little show, get a crowd, hand out balloons, but it was sort of paid for by city centres and stuff like that. Or
So he's trying to draw up business for the gigs, basically. It's an advertising kind of
no, look, no, he was like being employed because nobody comes and does street shows in these small towns on the coast, so people didn't know about it. So to create entertainment, or there was like some sort of festival or whatever, and then we would be booked and we would do shows, so paid shows on the streets. So it's like a gig, but we would do it outside. So I'd perform there. But then when there was like a big torch relay in '94, and I did fire shows that when that came in, and that was
paid
just
fire
like,
shows by the council, or
no, that was the first time when I just rocked up in the street, did shows, and asked for money. And in the end of the show, I just sort of said something like, "This is live street performing. Give me some money if you like it." That's basically what I said. Because then later in that year, when the summer came, it must have been '95. Then I went to England again, did some more juggling with people, and went to
seen
London.
street shows just before, when you've done the fire show, have you watched other people doing street shows?
No. So that's why I say that was my headlines. I just said, I like doing shows. This is very good. If you like it, give me some money. Thank you. And then I went just the next summer and saw shows in Covent Garden. So maybe '95. And I remember seeing shows, loving it, and also going like, that is such a good idea. Tell some jokes while you ask for money. Make them laugh, but also it's because I was just doing a sincere kind of thing, and I was watching it and I was picking up all this stuff. So that was like the first time when I really saw street shows that were like a proper Covent Garden show of how it was supposed to work. So I went home and used all those kind of techniques.
And just before we talk about when you go home and take the stuff away with you, can you describe what Covent Garden was when you went there? What the place looked like, the feel of the place, the shows you saw?
Yeah, well, I think I looked like it was amazing. Like I was getting on the tube for the first time in my life was a big deal. So I can't remember where I stayed there. I think maybe might have when we stayed in London might have been one of the only times when I actually stayed in like a youth hostel or something somewhere.
Yeah,
It
backpackers.
wasn't, yeah, backpackers, something like that.
What was
And
Covent
most
Garden
times,
itself? So, what was Covent Garden itself like when you arrived? So you come into this spot. Covent Garden, I assume, is different than seeing little booked shows around the sides. I assume it's different from juggling conventions. What do you see? What's the place to you at that time?
well, it was. I think I was at that point just surprised at how big it was. All kind of shows that I had been doing up until then had been with my back against the wall. So I hadn't seen the circle show properly until I came to Covent Garden. And still, then when I saw it there, but when I went back to Norway, I still kept doing shows with my back against the wall. I didn't make that step until '96, summer of '96, when I met 2 Australian guys, the Space Cowboy and Shep Huntley, and they basically just said they watched my show and they came to Copenhagen, and I traveled with them after that, and they're both basically going like, why are you standing against the wall? You're standing in the middle, and then you double your crowd.
Because you have people watching.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple arithmetics, but I think that might have been also because I came up doing all of my shows as a kid, was as a magician, and I can't really remember us ever really performing in a round.
Yeah, you don't want people behind.
Yeah, so I was just used to performing 180 cross-arch kind of style.
Just to drag back a little bit, you said that you took lines when you left Covent Garden and went back to Norway to work. What kind of lines did you take? What kind of stuff were you thinking about and integrating into your work at that time? And what were you doing as a show when you went back there?
I was doing in the beginning. I was just doing quite standard stuff. I juggled some fire, did a juggling act where, well, it wasn't so standard. I did some contortions as well. Did some contortions with handcuffs on, and then in the end I stood on a little stool and I juggled a fire torch and a knife and an apple and ate the apple with the handcuffs on, and I had all these volunteers up to grab me and hold me and hand me props and stuff, and I did a kind of running gag, but I couldn't open. So that's an uncommon thing, I guess, to do a sort of running gag like what magicians do, where with a bottle of, that was part of my crowd build, bottle of kerosene that I kept trying to open and couldn't get it to open while I was setting up the props, and then in the end I'd give it to a kid, and then the kid would take the lid off and I'd get a round of applause for the kid for solving this thing that I hadn't done. So
what lines came in then? So it's kind of standard stocky lines came in. The hat line changed when you went back.
Yeah, no, it wasn't so much of a specific line. It was just that I had never thought of how to ask for money apart from just asking for money, and then like all simple things, like it's like if your parents love you, they'll give you 20 kroners to give to the funny man, things like that I was like, oh, that is, so it was more, it influenced the way that I was thinking about what to say in the end of the show.
It opened the possibilities up.
Yeah. Like this is sort of feels like a big kind of aha moment where you go, oh wow, that is such a great idea. Like, don't just be boring, or don't just tell them that if they want to, they can give you money or like whatever. Also tell them that it's your job. I remember that too. Go like, oh, that's true. I never made any money at any point in my life apart from doing this.
Yeah, so, very much is.
Yeah, but then it's like, oh yeah, that's right. You should point that out.
Yeah, and so you say shortly after this you meet Shep and Space Cowboy Shane.
Yeah.
And is this when the freak show stuff starts to penetrate into your work? Because they're two very quite well-known freak show performers.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, they became. Yeah, Shep was doing
were they more at this time?
Yeah, I did. I did my first shows together with this. There's a group. It's actually centered around one guy called Hove Fjell, the headmaster. He runs a group called Pain Solution in Oslo, and he has been since, I'm not exactly sure, maybe 1990 or something. And I met him maybe in 93, and then we started doing some shows together. And he was the first one that I knew of that did live piercings and lying on broken glass and beds of nails and hooking sort of like hook oranges onto it and dancing around. So it was more like it was kind of, he was taking inspiration from a more ethnic kind of fakir style, but so that was the first kind of street show, freak show stuff that I did. Sorry, I dropped out there for a second.
Sometimes with street shows, with freak shows, there's kind of two, from what I've observed at least, there seems to be two schools of presentation. There's one that's very jokey and very playful, and everything's the suggestion of pain. And there's the other one, but everyone goes, look, it's so painful, and it's played seriously, and it's played dark. Was this dark and serious, or was this the Coney Island kind of playful, tongue-in-cheek kind of presentation?
No, so that's what I meant with like his style was more, in a way, more shamanic. I would say. In the beginning, they were doing like drumming and didgeridoo, and they had that kind of flavor to it, more ecstatic dancing and this this kind of stuff. That was, and then we were also. He's kind of still is punk, so we were using that kind of music, House of Pain and hip hop, and then I would do, when we met, then I would do Straight Jacket Escape, and also doing pins and things for like a pincushion act. So we did a bunch of stuff there together, and then I started to travel. 96, I went to a circus school in Bristol, actually, to Circomedia for a 3-month course. That's all I could afford. And at that time,
expensive.
well, it was, and you couldn't get any support from Norway to do it. And at that time, you were not allowed to do street shows while you were at the school. So I had to stop. Yeah. So you had to stop.
Did they give you a reason for
that? Not that I can remember. I can't remember what that was. But yeah. Anyway, 3 months was good. And then,
what was your experience of going to circus school like? I mean, you've done lots of workshops. You've done conventions and that kind of thing. So is this the same? Is the same kind of environment, or is this different?
No, it was different. It was just amazing to be with a bunch of other people who were all like dedicated to learning and developing. And I came there thinking that I was a juggler, and that I identified for a long time as a juggler. Then I was there. Remember, there was these 2 Germans. I can't remember their names. Anyway, they were just like machines, juggling 7 clubs, passing 11, and I was realizing that I was pretty far away from being a technical juggler. But when you at that point, we've been doing street shows for a few years, and we've been doing gigs with my dad, and that's just like, oh yeah, I'm a juggler. And then you get to compare yourself, and you go, oh, actually, there's something else about me that is making the audience think that I am a very good juggler, but it isn't my skills.
Can we draw on this a little bit more, and I'll postulate a definition between the two. Is you have entertainers and athletes.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I felt like I arrived at the school as a juggler, and I left as a performer, because whenever we were doing performance classes, which we had with Bim Mason, and that was very excellent. I really loved that. I found that this is where I have skills. And also when it then comes to putting together acts, that when we had assignments to do something, to make things funnier, to make something, that was kind of where my thing and what my strength was, because I had already had acts in it, particularly if I were doing talking. But at the time when I went to the circus school, most of the acts that I made was to music. And I sort of had, up until then, throughout my entire career, always spoken. So I didn't sort of know it at the time, but that was also not a good choice. I think it's, in general, right, even to this day, whenever I make acts, I think it's going to make a cool act, it's going to be to music or whatever. And then I start doing some shouting or something on top of the music, and people like it more, and I put the mic on, and then they just like it more when I talk as well.
I do find that, because I'm someone who talks a lot myself as well, and there's certain venues and gigs where they don't want you to talk. They want everything to be to music. Is there something you can say more about that?
I can do it to it. It's almost like when I'm doing if you're doing a corporate gig or something, and they go, oh, actually, we haven't got this, or we have done this instead, or you got this, and you go, well, it's like if you give me the microphone and you make sure that they can see me with the lights, and you have the music on, and you fulfill these few things, then you have the act that what I know is can be delivered. But I will make sure that everyone has a good time, whatever your restrictions are, but you do take notches off. I know I can lift the room to X level if you let them hear what I say, and the music is working, and they can see me perform, and there's a stage I can fall off. Then we got the whole thing. For each one of those things that you take away, but by the end, it's like if you give me a radio mic, so I can't do any of my mic jokes, I'll still be able to do the 12 minutes or half an hour, whatever you'd booked me for. I'll be able to do something, but it won't be. So it's like they take a little bit off as you
Do you find you play differently? A lot of these questions are going to seem obvious, but they're just for the sake of inducing the answer. Do you play differently when you've not got a mic and you're just doing stuff to music?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's
And can you say a bit why? How you play differently?
well, you just got to be a lot more visual, and it's also, I mean, I am in this situation where for the last 2004 or so, I've been mainly booked to do my tennis act, and then a couple of other acts, but always that one. And because people have seen it, it is very rare that I get the option that the only option is not to talk. There's been times when you do it without a mic, but
when I was learning, I watched you. When I was first beginning doing street shows, I saw a video of you performing without a mic, doing it just to music. And for many years, that's how I thought you worked.
On YouTube, that's right.
Yes.
So that is a really weird thing, because I never actually did that act like that. So that was for Juste pour Rire in 2006, and it was for the friend. It was for the. I was booked to do the English side. They have two galas, one in English and one in French, and I did the one in English, and they liked it, but they wanted to show it for the other one. So they have edited out my talking and used the music on top of it again. Because and that was so weird, because that then went some kind of, whenever that was, it was seen a lot, but I never actually performed the act without words. And because that thing became also, I heard that it got sold to some, so you could see it on planes when you were flying and stuff. And yeah, it was kind of odd to see.
Yeah, I feel like we've jumped forward in 2006, so let's pull ourselves back again. Yeah. So you've gone and you've done your 3 months in circus school. What happens next out of this then?
So then I moved to Denmark, and I lived in Copenhagen, which at the time was excellent for street performing. And then I did street performing.
Street performing? Laborious detail if possible, you know, the place, the pictures, the people.
I was performing at that time in Strø, which is the main walking street, and there I had yet to go and start performing circle shows. I didn't meet them for another couple of years. So for 2 years I lived in Denmark. I worked outside what at that point was the Danske Bank, which I now think is Søstrene Grene. I was there relatively recently doing another tour. And the bank was shut on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. So there was me and a few other people that was working that as a small pitch, and a little bit, maybe another 300 meters down the road. It's a very big walking street there in Copenhagen. By the Stork Fountain, there's a circular pitch, and a lot of people work there. Some people also worked in front of the town hall. I remember that was a very hard pitch, and the only one that I saw it really make it work was Bike Boy at that time.
And why do you think it was so good there? What are the quality? Because there's pitches everywhere in the world. You can go to any small town and find a square. Why was it good?
Why it was good there in particular, you mean, or why I ended up there?
You found, because you said, and it was great to do shows there. You said it was good to do shows there, and I'm just interested in why it was good to do shows there.
Well, for me, it was also like it was the first time when I was like living in a house and going to the pitch kind of every day. As soon as the bank closed, there'd still be people walking there, tourists and stuff. So it was kind of perfect. It was slower in the evenings and the weekdays. So it was the first town that I'd lived in where you could kind of work all year round. It's not awesome in winter, but it was still great. So, and I was doing tiny shows at the time, I'm sure, but because there was also maybe just 2 of us on the pitch, you might then do 2 shows each and then hang out for a bit and then call it a day.
And had you started bringing the tennis racket in and things like this at this point?
No, not yet. I did contortion, as I said, I did a sort of contortion act where I did twist my arms around wearing handcuffs and stuff. So that was the
Kind
only
of the arm piece.
Yeah, like I
Skit
get
thing.
Yeah, like skipping rope kind of thing. But I get to I'd take the handcuffs out and I go, oh, this is very exciting. I'm going to get someone to help me out, and I get a girl out to help me put the handcuffs on. She put the handcuffs on, and then I go, now I'm going to take. And then I'd sort of discover that the handcuffs were on the front and they needed to be on the back for this thing that I was going to show. And it's my fault. All right, I'll fix it, and then I'll start doing the style is very similar to what I do now, where I say I'm going to do some contortion or whatever, but then it's mainly chaos, and I get caught up in my braces and stuff, and I get the handcuff finally on the back, and then I'm going, now I'm going to show you what it is, and it is to take the routine I was going to show is going to take these handcuffs from the back to the front. That was what I was going to show you. And they're laughing because they think you can take it back the same way, and then I twist them up and do this kind of dislocation thing as it goes over the top, which would lead into me juggling.
Were you doing the confetti? Because the confetti is something that it's got a big link with your work. There's only a couple of other people I've seen use them as well, which is a guy called Hacky who uses them beautifully. There's not many people who, at least people who haven't watched you in the years after and taken it from yourself.
Yeah. No, I was doing it. I was doing confetti then. Yeah.
Where did you get the idea for confetti from?
I actually was in the early 90s. I was just my whole life. I was going to magic conventions and stuff, and then there was the Norwegian Championship of Magic in, I can't remember when that was, but maybe it was even in 89 or 88 or something. And there was this guy there who, as far as I remember it, because it's so long ago I can't remember, but he would throw glitter in his act, like I remember less glitter anyway. In my mind, that's what it was. And he would do some magic. It's like, here's a coin, here's a card or something, and then he would throw glitter.
And is that to emphasize a point? Because that's
it's very unclear what it was, but I thought it was just incredibly funny, and I don't remember him thinking that was the aim of the act. He's doing it like a punctuation, but in the hindsight, when I've talked a little bit to Norwegian magicians, no one else have any recollection of this. So maybe I am remembering one moment from the table championship or something, but something that somebody did using glitter to accentuate their act. That became this thing that I just thought that is so funny, and it makes the act. Anything that you've done, you throw some confetti, and it makes that thing that you did into a moment. Now I've sort of crystallized that into thinking about it as it's a visual rim shot in a way.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And one of the joys of that from an outside perspective is that you can sort of go, I deserve applause, without looking like an asshole.
Yeah.
You're not doing the pose every time, like a big trick.
And you can also then, of course, you can then subvert it in so many ways. You can do it in the moment when it's supposed to be, after you've said your name, and when it's a ta-da moment. But I also use it. So through my act, there's an evolution of why it is being done. So any good recurring joke, it's the same joke, but it is now applied in a different way. So there's an evolution of the recurring joke by bringing it back at inappropriate or funny, or you use it like within the short period. It's like I'm throwing it because it's the first throw is a big throw, so that they know what you're on about with the confetti. And then it is when I do an anticlimactic moment, and then I say I'm going to squeeze my muscular body through it, and I sprinkle some confetti on my body, so you're rubbing yourself with it, and then each time there's like a slightly different thing. And then
you give context, and then weave you give the context of the confetti, and then it gets applied to a different context of the show with an emotional content carried through it.
Yeah. And then it keeps being sort of surprising by doing it at a climactic moment, or an anticlimactic moment, or a funny moment, or an actual beautiful moment. And like my kids show, there's a couple of moments that get I get the kid up to do a little thing with the music box, and the kid is playing the song, and I'm just drizzling them with confetti, and it's this weird thing because they've already laughed about it, and then you're using it and go, oh, and it's so sweet. It's like they're standing in this confetti rain playing some music, and it's just the kid that does something, and all you do, and you're just using it, and then all of a sudden it changes the parameters of what you're doing, and it makes it into these theatrical moments. So that's at least the potential.
Is there a thing that you've primed the audience to respond to this thing? Every time they see confetti, there's this kind of highlighting, so that when you bring the kid out, they're primed with this already.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's not the first thing that I do to confetti. The first throw of confetti is usually when I say my name. My name is Captain Frodo, and 44 years ago, I was born from normal parents. And I throw some confetti or whatever joke it is or funny comment I say. Sometimes it's just, if it's for kids or whatever, I'm normally just saying I'm Circus Captain Frodo, here to blow your minds. Throw some confetti.
That's traditional thing of applause is you give your introduction, you expect your applause back. So it almost seems like the conditioning begins there with that.
Yeah,
this
that's right.
Applause. This means this.
That's exactly right. And then they applaud. And then later on, when you do it, I throw the confetti, and it is completely inappropriate to applaud. And then it is funny because you've done it at that. It was like, I frequently get in situations where I'm stuck in a racket or stuck with stuff around me, or like when I fall off the stage or sometimes.
I'm sorry, someone at my door. You just carry on. I've just got to answer my door. Carry on, brother. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be back in 2 seconds.
So yeah, you fall off the stage, and finally I can talk to you guys a little bit here. He's going off, so we can get down to the real business. No, I'm joking, of course. But yeah, so then it's like when I fall off the stage, and then you have the audience thinking, "Oh my God, this is terrible. He fell off because he's all strapped up with this leg wrapped up around him." And then you throw some confetti, and it totally releases the tension, and they go, maybe he's a bit broken, but or maybe there was a big mistake. But by throwing the confetti, you're also telling them that whatever it was that just happened, it's okay. And so much of it is based, of course, in that the audience is looking to you for clues as to how to behave in regards to what has just happened. So if I've fallen off the stage or I've knocked the mic stand over, they go, "Oh, that was a mistake." And then I throw confetti at it, and they go, "Oh, everything is okay." Like, I have shown them that I don't care. In fact, I do throw confetti with impeccable timing. So by the time the mic stand falls over, if I've played my cards right, by the time that I knock the mic stand over and I throw that confetti, I get a round of applause. Because by that stage, it's the biggest fail that's happened there. The confetti goes on it, and they go, oh, it's like it becomes like a punchline throw of confetti. Like you've commented on all these silly things, and then a big mistake comes, confetti comes. It's the wrong thing to do, but it's the right thing to do because it was wrong, and 2 wrongs is a right. And all of a sudden, like,
make them feel safe.
Hey, makes them feel safe. Yeah, exactly. Because you're there on stage.
It's organized chaos.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just like when you're watching slapstick, there's a fine line always in the beginning when I'm being bumbly and fumbling with the stuff. They don't know if you're just a little bit uncoordinated, but that's okay because the character doesn't seem to care about it. It's going having some issues here, but it's still carrying on business as usual. So they go, "Oh, this is a bit odd." So then when the bigger thing starts to happen, they've been clued into the fact that this is okay, but your attitude towards what it is that's happened that's out of control is ultimately what's going to make them go. By the time first time I fall off the stage, I want to make sure that some people are going, "Oh, that was a bit is this real? Is this supposed to happen?" But you also want them to be able to laugh at it because you don't want them to be too afraid. So that was the thing in street shows, that when I was doing street shows in the beginning, and I think it's also like what has made me the kind of contortionist or dislocationist sideshow person that I am, is that you can't do that. You're talking about the different styles of freak show, the one that's just going like, "This is freaky," and the kind of jokey kind of thing. You do need to have, if you're doing freak show stuff on the street, you need to have an approach so that people don't take their kids away and go like, this is not for us. And when you say you're going to do this location, a lot of the time people think, oh, well, I don't think I actually want to see that. So I think that's where some of the comedy and the slapstick came from.
It's softening up and making them feel safe. I mean, one of the things I've always thought, particularly with things like the human blockhead, I've talked to people about that the human blockhead is something that pushes people into their seats in a venue.
Yeah.
But in a street show, if you push people away, if you make them recoil, they keep moving. They go.
They just go away. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So the routine that I do with the blockhead now, I don't really acknowledge that I do the blockhead. I call it a balance. And it's a very ridiculous thing, but I've just done a balance with the spoon and caught it behind my ear, and then I reframe it as a sideshow thing or whatever. And I never actually say that I do it. And it takes a little while before later on that I sort of discover it or whatever. So in this absurdist kind of comedy, never acknowledge it. But I have done that act. I did it at the street festival in Denmark, actually. It's a few years ago now. But by now, I think my showmanship is so strong that now I can get away with doing that, because the routines and the way that I interact with people. But in the beginning, you got to be a very likable character to be doing stuff that people don't want to see. It's because if you say that you're going to do something, they need to like you a lot to trust you to stand around.
And to trust that you'll be okay, and
that I will be okay, and that they will be okay. Yeah, that they will feel okay.
Negative empathy which could be potentially be created through the perception of pain.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, do you want to finish your point?
No, I just gone, I haven't in none of my street shows or whatever. I was going to say we've never really pretended to be in pain, except this one show I did. But this was the first full stage show that I made with Shep and Shane, the Space Cowboy. We did the Happy Side show, the very first season of that, called Educational Torture. We reenacted, like a play, the history of torture set in a sort of schoolroom where the lessons were. And we did that routine where you eat a string or whatever, and then you do a little cut, and you can pull it out through your flesh.
Okay, no, I don't know the routine, but
anyway, it's full-on routine to see at the best of times. But at that point there, we did this, and I was doing that routine, and Shepard was being this sadistic headmaster, and he was grabbing this string or like ribbon, or was it? It was a little thin ribbon. It's pulling it out, and your flesh is going out. And I was screaming at the time, like I was in pain, and it was so unbelievably full on. We only did that one season, and then never did that show again. But if you do that kind of material and you scream, we were all like, going, how come we decided that we wanted to do a show that was going to be the Happy Side show, and now we've made this stuff that's so full on? So yeah, that was like a blind alley. What is it called? A blind alley that we went in.
There's a phrase that I've heard said a few times where you turn to an audience and go, do you want to see blood? And they go, yeah. And then you go, there's some blood. And they go, oh, no.
Actually, no thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So dragging you back again to the story, you're in Denmark. You're busking in Denmark regularly for the first time.
Yeah, that's right. So then I would do 2 or 3 shows a day, and that's really where my skills came, and what eventually sort of landed me the friendship of Shep and Shane, because then it took 2 years or so before they arrived there, and they just arrived on a whim. Had some time before they were going to go to Edinburgh, and they decided to drive up there. They stayed one night. I arrived on the bigger pitch and saw Shane wearing my hoodie and didn't know him. It turned out that my girlfriend at the time, she had lent him my hoodie whilst they were waiting for me, and she was hanging out with those guys. And we got along, and I said, why don't you guys come and stay at my place? Because I had been touring around and needing places to stay, as I just said before. So I invited him to come and stay at my place, and one of the Shep slept in the van, and Shane slept in the house. And during that night, I had a terrible fight with my girlfriend, and we broke up. And next morning, didn't know what to do, and Shep said, "Well, why don't you just come with us?" So I said, "Okay," and I jumped in the car, and that was that day when they drove up there and drove away, literally in 24 hours. They basically came and picked me up, and that has become the thing that's guided the rest of my life. That night there when they came.
Oh, and how has it guided the rest of your life?
So I went with them to Edinburgh. Immediately after, went to Amsterdam, then went to Edinburgh. And in Edinburgh, I met this guy, John Kamikaze, who ran the Kamikaze Freak Show. And he saw what I did on the street. And he basically said, "Hey, would you like to go on tour with us? We're going on tour after the festival and stuff." And then I stayed there and I worked with them for 2.5 years. And that became my sort of pivot off the street. I mean, we worked for another, I probably did my last street shows in 2003 or 2004. So I still worked on the street. The main income for the Happy Sideshow for all the first years, and while I was still doing the Freak Show, was the street. That was what was keeping me alive. But I then started doing more and more acts inside. And
So, just before we go on to that, is just, can I get your perception of Edinburgh when you went there for the first time?
yeah, that was in '98. And at that point, it was not taken over and controlled by the Fringe. So we were just doing, when it was really cooking, there was like 3 circle shows staggering their beginnings on the Mile, and Hunter Square was running, and Parliament Square was running, sometimes with 2 shows, and the Mound. I didn't perform in the Mound then, but yeah, so it was just this. You could do lots of shows, and it was at that point, because we'd stopped in York and done some shows on the way and in Amsterdam, so I had just swapped to doing the circle show. So I was just like, whoa.
And what's the transition involved, swapping to do a circle show? I don't know if it's me live at the moment or if it's Frodo. You're back. Hey.
Hi, man.
Yeah, so you just swapped to doing a circle show from doing a kind of half circle show. What involved in that? How did the change happen, and what happened?
The very first time when I did that, it was in Amsterdam, and it was basically just it was at Lights a Plane, and it was my turn to go on, and there wasn't any other choice. And Space Cowboy had been egging me on, going like, "You just got to do it. You just got to turn around and look at the back as well." And the effect was kind of instant. You make a bigger hat immediately just because there are more people.
So the show didn't change much, because I always use the term circle show as kind of a description of a style of show, as well as the shape of the crowd. So did the style of show change? Did the delivery, the structure change?
No, my material stayed the same for those shows. During that Edinburgh, I did change my show completely and did a straitjacket and all that. My first show was very idiosyncratic and eccentric, and I think that was also what both Shep and the Space Cowboy liked about it. I was not like the other acts in the way that my show was set up. Like, I was doing a crowd build and everything, but then hanging with a bunch of Australians, with those 2, and then meeting others, it's like it rubbed off. And then when I a few months later went to Australia, it was like some of those pitches working Circular Quay and Darling Harbour and Burke Street, and down what's that pitch called down by it used to be called the Esso building down by the Yarra there. And it was hard work to get a crowd at that time. It's really hard. And I think that's why a lot of Australian performers does well, I think, when they come to Europe.
It seems to have endless crowd builds.
Yeah. And anyway, doing a circle show so that by the time that you actually do your finale and everything, that you have people all the way around becomes an absolute, it's important.
Well, you've been there an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you do your 5 minutes of material, and then you just get on with your life.
And so you said that you met a guy. You're gonna have to remind me his name in Edinburgh.
Yeah, his name was John Kamikaze. He ran a show called the Kamikaze Freak Show, and then I did about a year of touring. And after that year of touring with them, we were doing a gig in Belgium, and I managed to get, because they were doing a big kind of gig, and I managed to get Shane, the Space Cowboy, a gig with them as well. We were talking about it, and Shane, the Space Cowboy, has a lot of skills, but he wasn't doing sword swallowing at the time. But he still had a lot of freak show stuff going on.
Is that the kind of, I described them as non-skill freak show acts? So your bed of nails and the straight jacket potentially could be included in there. The stuff that's kind of the selling of it is the skill rather than the performing of it.
Yeah, well, it's also he also did. He was also an very, very good whip cracker. So his main act in that show was a whip cracking act. Single whip, double whip, and he juggles the whips, and then where I would hold roses and hold things, and so it'd be a tight sort of skill act to more or less to music. Yeah. So that was his main act, but he also did already then, as far as I remember, he does this stunt where he puts fish hooks into his eye sockets and lifts these irons up with it. So as far as I remember, he was doing that as well.
What were you doing as your finale for the freak show then? Were you doing your contortion pieces, doing the shackles?
So at that point, I was also doing I would squeeze through a coat hanger, and the guy had seen that, and he said, "Oh well, that's all well and good, but when you're on the big stage and whatever in a nightclub somewhere," we were touring a lot in Belgium and Holland at the time, playing in kind of rock and roll venues. He goes, "You just can't see that thing. You got to do a racket, squeeze through a racket," which other people were doing. I wasn't the first person to do it, so I went and bought that on his recommendation.
Do you have any idea of the lineage of the racket? I mean, it's something I've done for many years. It's something I'm quite interested in discovering, because some people say, "Oh, it's vaudeville. It's been around since the beginning of time." Then other people claim heritage and ownership of it. Do you have any idea?
So squeezing through hoops goes back until the dawn of time, and squeezing through like there's some guy who called himself the King of Rings, and he did like whatever it was. It's like 12 stunts with 12 inches of steel or whatever. So that was like, that's in so Charlie Holland's book, Clever Tricks and Strange Turns. There's some posters of that, and so anyway, that goes back really far, and I don't know who it was that did the first tennis racket, but I am pretty sure that there was someone who Jim Rose presented as the Armenian Rubberman, and that might have been in maybe 94 or something, whenever they came to Europe the second time. I think the first time was 93, and then it came 94, or maybe I'm thinking 95 anyway. And I think that's where John Kamikaze had seen it, because he worked with Jim Rose for a while.
Okay.
And that's, so I kind of, yeah, that's how but I don't know. That's the short answer. I don't know when or who it was that first did a racket. But by the time that I did 2 rackets, I had never seen anyone that did 2 rackets. And I just bought one that I was going to have as a spare, and it was too big. But I didn't at the time know exactly how big I needed it. So I just thought, I'll keep it anyway. And then at some point when we were in Amsterdam and we were doing this gig, I just was playing around with it and realized that I could squeeze my leg through it in the way that I now do in my act. And it was sort of voted down in the dressing room, going, no, the smaller one is more impressive. And you can't sort of come out and do one racket with that and then just do another one where you just put your leg through or whatever. That doesn't work. And then it took another few months or whatever before I had the idea that I should put the two rackets together and start the first and then start the second one. And I really started performing that around about the time that might have been two rackets, might have been permanently in the show from 99.
And was it self-built? Did it begin working as soon as you started doing it together, or did it take a long process of development and tweaking?
No, so I started actually, I said I changed my show. So in 1998, went to the Edinburgh Festival, and the day before Fringe Sunday, I put my suitcase down, and I was doing all this kind of following and carrying on with a kerosene bottle that I said, and I had a running gag with a cup and catch the ball in the cup kind of thing. Did all of that, got my crowd, turned around to start my show, and somebody had nicked my suitcase from the edge of the sidewalk. So I just bailed because I didn't know what to do. And then next day was Fringe Sunday, which I don't know how that is now, but back then you just went down, found a spot, and then I did.
Where did you find a spot?
At Fringe Sunday, they set up down at the Meadows, I think it's called. It's like down at the bottom of the mile. There's all rides and stuff. So I can't remember where, but it's like at the bottom of the seat or whatever there. That whole field was taken over.
Was that by street performers?
Yeah, no, it's set up like a fair or whatever, but street performers were allowed to set up wherever you could fit. And then you'd set up, but you could set up anywhere. So all street performers made their own pitch and just did back-to-back shows. So I did 6 shows in a row, just packing down, and while you were packing down, you were getting another crowd. It was like...
And so losing your gear the day before is a big problem.
Yeah. And then me and the Space Cowboy drove down, parked on the field to get a good spot, and meanwhile worked out, because I at that time had the straitjacket that and that was in my backpack, which was in the Space Cowboy's car, but I wasn't using it in my street show because my street show was all weird and quirky and little things and a funny little tie that I did gags with. It wasn't like big and shouting. So anyway, we basically in the back of the van went, okay, well, how about you do some of those contortion things that you could do with your handcuffs and everything, but you do it through a coat hanger. And that was also by suggestion. Like we were going like, I could do that thing. And then in that moment came up with this tennis elbow spinning. And I also do this thing where I suck my guts in, which is like a sort of yoga kind of move. So I thought there and then, I will do that. And then I will say, these are a couple of the things I do, the dislocation. These are a couple of things that I can do with my body that makes it possible most of the time to be able to squeeze out of the straitjacket.
So you used them as selling points for the racket.
Yeah. So that was all like, I was like, yeah, I was born double jointed.
Sorry, it was a selling point for the straitjacket at this point.
Yeah. Couple of things that I could do that makes it possible for me, even though we strap it around and we put and at that point didn't have a chain either because I didn't use it in my show. So I thought that act out and then did it 6 times the next day, and then never went back. But then a couple of days later, because we were hanging out and getting along well with a lot of the guys, the street guys who were just not the street performers, but the alcoholics and the guys who were hanging out, I was getting along really good with this one guy. And then one day he just said, so I heard that somebody said somebody stole your suitcase. And I said, yeah, totally. Oh man, it'd be so good if you could get it back, because it's basically just filled with garbage, like bags of confetti, and there was no money in it, like the handcuffs that I had. But all of it is just hard to get when you're in the middle of a festival. And then the guy took me along with him, and we went around to somewhere down in Leith, and no questions asked, but he went in, and he came out with the suitcase, and nothing was gone, and someone had taken it all the way, because most of the time I would expect that they'd open it, not find anything, throw it in the garbage, and move on. But someone had taken the case with them, and it was far away. Like Leith is like 20-minute walk or something, half an hour walk. I thought at the time it's crazy to go with this guy. Now they're gonna throw me in the river or something. Try and
How they're going to take everything else.
Yeah, take my costume too, which is the only thing I had.
Shirts off my back.
Yeah, but then anyway, then I got my gear back, but my other show was already outperforming my quirky one after just a week of doing it. Because as sad as it kind of is, if you do a quirky little show, sometimes it would be such a stonker because people really would get you, and it would get this massive. But when you're doing a ground show and it's little and it's weird, it's it just needs to. They really need to get your humor, and when you do, you're getting 20-pound drop or whatever. But if not, then it just becomes this weird thing. So just going bold and brash and be really simple street show. So my first show was more complex, and a lot of those acts are still stuff that functions in the show now, because there's more things going on, and there's things that are recurring. Content. Yeah. Yeah, that's more structure to it and more content. And the street show that I after that did, even though it built up from the coat hanger and the contortion into doing the straitjacket, it became the tennis rackets, more bigger and bigger as a routine first. And even though that was the highlight, still as a closer to do the challenge, and before I was out of the rackets, I would get a guy to come out so that there would be seamless transition into the straitjacket. And then I would do the straitjacket and basically go all that good stuff. It's like the ballyhoo in a freak show where you're outside. You've actually seen the best stuff on the outside. Then you pay the ticket and you go in, and you just want to get out of there again.
Is there a simple thing with the straitjacket that it fulfills a purpose? It's such a clear narrative in the audience's mind of you're going to get in this, you're going to get out. That's why it's been a closer for nearly 100 years.
Absolutely. It is such a simple story. And until I had routined my tennis rackets to the point that it wasn't that routine with the slapstick and everything, then I am in a way now recreating the narrative of the straitjacket in a comedic kind of way, where I come out, say, I'm going to squeeze through these rackets. As far as anyone's concerned, it's going to take a couple of minutes, do a few jokes, and then get on with our life. But then it takes 12 minutes to get through, and it really becomes like I'm stuck, and it's on. So by the time when I get out of those rackets, it really has the feeling of an escape. So in a certain sense, I've stolen that narrative and added it to the other routine, because the escape it's a powerful thing. It's very clear when it's done. When you get that jacket and slam it on the ground, it's done, and it's an emotional release, and it's like, and the only thing left is just for you to come forward, like I warned you before. Come and give me the money.
And so, did you lose the straitjacket fairly quickly, or was it a slow process developing up the elements within the racket show? And I suspect as well that those elements weren't just developed on the street, right? They developed on the stage work as well.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't put the last... Oh, sorry, I just saw that some people are typing something on the side there, yeah. 45 minutes about juggling, yeah.
Silver.
Yeah, that's great. Nice one, Craig. That's great. I met Silver when we were in Edinburgh in '98. That was good. But yeah, now I lost the thread. You were saying they're doing the development of the tennis number, yeah. So
Human One, who's been on YouTube, I believe Human One's watching on the YouTube channel, so you might not see him on Facebook if you wonder what we're talking about.
Oh yeah.
He said, advice for not getting your case done on pitch. Super interesting talk. Thanks, fellas.
Yeah.
I don't think he's the best guy to ask for advice, mate.
Yeah, because the only mistake, I guess, was to put it behind me and to get so involved of the whole thing. If I were to do it again now, it was because they've closed down a very large road. So I'm trying to get both of my hands into the shot of the camera here. Very large, but that became very small, actually. Very large road. I put it down behind me and worked in the center of the road. So there was probably 2 meters to my case, because I wanted people to walk past, and I just was not aware that such a thing could happen. And I would just now, if I were to do it again and avoid it, is just to place that case in a place where you can see it, more sort of to the front of the thing, or make sure that there are people there that got your back. Some other buskers that are sitting there keeping an eye on it if it's dodgy. And at the time, I think it was also just because it was on the mile. And as I said, at that time, there were so many shows. There was no stewards. So after I had started, it was pretty much the rule. As soon as my edge closed off and became a circle, the one next to you were allowed to start up. And sometimes if you couldn't hold your crowd, then you would lose, and you'd sort of get this shared show where the people in the middle weren't sure which show they're watching. So because of all of that, I think that's probably why, because there should have been a queue.
The queue protects.
Yes.
And so you're developing the from the straitjacket in the street show. No, you developed from the straitjacket into doing the 2 rackets with the longer 12-minute routine. And we talked about that being stage and street developed.
Yeah. So the main bulk of the tennis act came from the street, but it was all just talking and jokes and the 2 rackets, but it wasn't with the slapstick in the same way. I didn't use a microphone and all that, because at the time I didn't have a sound system. When at this time Shane the Space Cowboy also didn't have a sound system at that time. Shep had one, but he didn't use it all the way through a show. He used it for his bottling speech and to play some music in the beginning. Had a little Maxi Mouse.
Was that fairly common for people not to use? Because now every busker has an amp near enough. Every performer uses
it. It was in the very beginning when I worked in Copenhagen. There was nobody who had a speaker of any sort.
And did you feel like? Do you look back on that now and think, if only I would have had a speaker?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not really regretting anything that I did there, but I just like when I first started doing full circle shows, that you go, why haven't I done this? Like, why is this such a revelation? But then again, it was similar to when I watched somebody do money lines and crack some jokes, and I went, that's such a great idea, instead of just plain asking for money.
I ask is just out of interest, because amps now are everywhere and very pervasive in street performance, and amps might in fact be the death of street performance, because all these places are being closed down now primarily because of sound issues. And
that's true. Yeah, I know that they were there was a big African drumming group, which was like our main. They would just get to the pitch and then they wouldn't play ball on being in the line. So if they got to the pitch first, then they would have that pitch for the whole day. But they had some problems with that because people were complaining because they were very loud. But because none of us others had amps, apart from the audience shouting every now and then, and maybe we would have, if the crowd got big, could get in trouble for blocking shops that were next to it or whatever. But that was the only kind of problems we had. But it is true. I mean, even when I was still performing in Edinburgh or on the street, because I just seamlessly went on into performing indoors. And that was a crossover too, of course. It's the only way we sold tickets with the Happy Side show was to
go and sell it.
I did a street show, and then at the end of my street show, I'd go, here are my pals, and Shep and the Space Cowboy would come out and hand out flyers at the end of it. But
is that kind of thing when the circus arrives in town, that people go around before the circus begins and they do a kind of parade through the town? It's a little bit like that, right?
Yeah, it is like that. Yeah, I mean, the 3 of us all with strong circle shows are handing it out, and I already see, and we would all basically say, well, we got all this awesome stuff that's just too full on and too hardcore to be done on the street, so come and check us out at the assembly rooms or wherever we played, and then that would sell tickets.
Yeah. And so we were talking before about developing the racket routine, from being the simple through the racket to being this whole detailed kind of slapstick routine with mic stands and cables. And
so I performed that act with the Kamikaze Freak Show and on the street, and then the way that it is now with the slapstick element as well, because it's got the talking, it's got the confetti, so it's got jokes all the way through, and a sort of narrative. On the street, there was also a lot more street lines and are you ready for this? And on the count of 3, I'm going to be doing this. Everybody count down, and I'll do dislocations, and we do and go. So it was taking the same amount of time, but there was less material or whatever you want to say, content in it. But then I was working on. I really wanted to do I also played a musical saw, and I wanted to do a kind of microphone George Carl inspired routine where I played the saw. And I dropped the saw and I sawed off one of my fingers as a gag, and then I get the music on, and then it's this pumping drum and bass track, and I say it's not this one, and then in the end I do play music on top of that track. That was kind of thing. Did that for this tour called anyway, we did the tour. This was maybe in like 2001 or something like that, and I tried to do that act, and I only did it on the opening night, I think, because the act was terrible. I just couldn't make it work. But I'd made all the sort of slapstick material, and within the next couple of shows, I started to do some of that material whilst doing my racket act, and that's really where it came from. Because whilst I'm standing with the one racket wrapped around me, I've really understood that it's like, you have to have this kind of obstacle that gets between what you want to do. And when the slapstick came, then it's like pretty soon I learned to knock the mic stand over. And then at another gig later on, I realized that I could get the chair hooked onto the thing and then and then it was just this slow escalation. And it was like the routine that was already there, that was already my bread and butter act. So it's like looking at it back now, I'm sure that it was like compared to what it is now, it was a slow, terrible act, but it was still my main gig and people liked it and loved it. It was the main thing on my show. But it wasn't until I started adding the slapstick where I was kind of taking an entire new act, or at least a new element that was intended to be a 3-4 minute bit on its own, and fit that material into a routine that was already long. So that was one of the main things that made the act into what it was. And the second thing was that that just sort of expanded. Every time I came up with a new gag, the act got a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And then in 2003, I got work with the Circus Oz, which is a big Australian, it's the biggest Australian circus.
And how did you get work with the biggest Australian circus?
Well, basically, they saw me perform in the Happy Side show, and then they saw me there in 2002 at the Adelaide Fringe Festival. And I was also doing a different show with other content in a little side show. Like I was standing outside doing the spruiking and getting people come in. That was called the Tiny Top. And at that time, I didn't do the rackets in the...
People who might know, is that bringing people into the venue? Is that
standing outside going, roll up people right here on the inside. You will see the unbelievable, the amazing. You've seen this guy on television, and now you can see him here in the flesh. It's the Incredible Rubberman. You have heard about this guy. Don't be the one to miss out. That kind of stuff. Outside, getting them in, selling tickets, doing 15-minute shows on every half hour, spending 15 minutes to get another crowd in, and there was like a whole team of us working. So I was doing that. I did like 100 shows during that Fringe. And the people from Circus Oz were looking for someone, and after seeing me do all of that, and then they came and saw the rackets as well in another show that I was doing, because I was doing the can balance, a version of that. Totally. At that time, I put 6 milk crates on top of each other, and then I put a paint tin turned upside down, and then a bean can on top of that one, and I sit down on the top of it and put both of my legs behind my head, and I just balance on this tiny little can on the top of it. And
why
sorry?
Why do a routine like that?
Sorry?
Why do a routine like that? What inspired you to do that kind of routine?
I was looking for another routine because we had made another show. So I wanted to do another act, and I had seen a couple of different pictures of people doing this. One was in a book of Ripley's Believe It or Not, a guy who could sit on an upside down like a whiskey glass. So I saw this picture and I thought, that's very cool. And then somebody bought me a picture of another guy who sat on a little perch with a little stool or whatever. And those two were the first kind of things that I saw. So I learned how to do that, learned how to sit on a can on the floor. And then I did for a while in the sideshow, I did it just as a little quick kind of gag where I put the bean can on top of the bar stool that I use in my tennis act, just quickly. Actually, first I just sat on the stool, just put it on and balanced, then sat on that, and then developed it into this act where I balanced up high.
So do you use beer crates? You said you used. I mean, I know that
In the
there's a lot of.
beginning, I did milk crates, 6 milk crates, and then a couple of cans. And then when we did the show, which was like the third show that the Happy Sideshow did inside Sydney Opera House, it was a collaboration with this awesome band led by this guy called Michelangelo and the Black Sea Gentlemen, and their aesthetic is kind of Balkan gypsy flavor. So the milk crates just didn't fit in. And then underneath the house, I found a bin and some tins and stuff, and that's where that it's such a smart idea.
Like Russian dolls.
For myself.
One thing goes inside the other thing goes inside.
Exactly. And once I thought of that, then it was just perfect for touring, because anything else just took such big amount of space. I might have to go for a little wander, actually. I'm running out of battery on my thing here. I've used 91% of my...
We're on 9%.
I got 9% now, but I was 100% when I started. It's taking a lot more battery than I thought.
We've got two options. So either it's almost an hour and a half. We can leave this interview here and pick up another day if you want, or we can run around and plug in. It's up to you.
Yeah, maybe we could potentially leave it here, because this has been excellent and it's gone into more detail than I had ever imagined.
Thank you for sharing that detail. I really enjoyed it.
No, it's always interesting to be going into detail, and when people are actually, because most of the time you'd end up skimming through real quick and then getting to something else. But yeah, it's also, of course, nice for me, because I don't think so much about my street performing things, because it is a long time ago. So it's been lovely to think through some of that stuff too.
And part of the joy as well, I suppose, of being interviewed by a street performer is that I know it. I've done it myself. I've spent the years on the street. So when we're chatting, it's not like you're chatting to some celebrity gossip person or some variety person who has no idea about what it's like to be on the street.
Yeah, exactly. It's because it was, in so many ways, it was the whole kind of foundation. Those two, I don't know if I said that before, but those 2 years in Copenhagen of doing 2 or 3 shows a day, and we could do every day of the week we could work there. And that's really where I had done a lot of shows and stuff before that, but that's where I really became a solo performer, because I'd performed with my dad, performed with another partner. We did a juggling act together for 6 months or so. But yeah,
I think also by the sound of my interview, I've interviewed 61 interviews. This is maybe it's 62. Yeah. I'm not sure. One of the things that I found with a lot of people who've got quite original, interesting stuff in their work is that at some point they've been in a bit of a vacuum. They've developed in somewhere that's isolated from the street. So doing magic shows with your dad and doing these kind of things perhaps was something which helped you not become a show that's the same as everyone else's, because you've sat on the pitch and just, so that works, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. I did an interview on the Hideaway Circus podcast, and that it started up talking about magic, and then I go into, because there's an element of magic in a lot of what I do. Just this whole doing slapstick is a kind of illusion, because I'm not actually falling over, and you're not actually in trouble. You're doing your shtick there like any other shtick, but it looks like you're in trouble. So it's kind of interesting how these...
What you picked? Oh no.
Nice one. Well, you're excellent at driving forward a conversation, and you're excellent at listening and remember where it was that I went off when I went off on the tangent. It's very good.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. I genuinely have, and I'll talk to you after the interview, hopefully, and we'll arrange to get the second half of your career developing from the street and really becoming the stage star that I think you did become and have become.
Yeah, all the way to Vegas now.
Go, brother. Thank you very much for your time. Is there anything, last things you want to say to all the people that have watched?
Yeah, if you want to hear me talk about more philosophical and other aspects, but all of it seen through the lens of showmanship, I am putting out a weekly podcast. I have done it for 18 weeks straight, and there's 2 more episodes of this first season. But all the episodes are there. The podcast is called The Way of the Showman. It's where I view the world through the lens of showmanship, and it gives a philosophical and esoteric exploration as like a foundation for what it is that we do, for all of us who are lost now in this time when what we love the most has been taken away from us.
Well, we will put that the links for that in the description. I'd like to say, everyone, please check it out. It's informative, well researched. I think it's a really beautiful podcast to listen to. Check it out. So for now, from me, from Frodo, I'm going to say goodbye, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. I'll catch you soon. If you do, check the update video. If you can join the Patreon